It started with a tip. My editor handed me a folder labeled Karenga and Panthers, 1971, and told me to dig. Two revolutionary groups at war, he said. Find the truth. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew it would be dangerous. Los Angeles was a battleground for revolution in the late 60s and early 70s. The Black Panthers were the face of militant resistance, and Maulana Karenga, the creator of Kwanzaa and head of the U.S. organization, stood as a rival in black liberation ideology. I started at the library, poring over articles from the late 60s. The Panthers and Karenga had once shared the same vision, uplifting black communities, but somewhere along the way, their ideologies clashed. The rivalry turned violent. Karenga was a scholar, a professor, a cultural icon. He had built the U.S. organization on African traditions and black unity, but whispers of paranoia and authoritarianism surrounded his leadership. Some called him a visionary, others, a tyrant. The Panthers were the street warriors, unapologetically militant. They organized community programs but carried guns to protect themselves from police brutality. They had enemies everywhere: law enforcement, COINTELPRO, and, apparently, Karenga's U.S. organization. I met with a former Black Panther named Diane. The tension was always there, she said. Karenga thought he owned the movement. We thought he was a puppet, maybe even working with the FBI. Then things got bloody. The pivotal moment came on January 17, 1969, at UCLA. Two Panthers, John Huggins and Bunchy Carter, were shot dead in Campbell Hall during a dispute with Karenga's U.S. organization. It was supposed to be a meeting about black studies programs, but it turned into a war zone. I tracked down an old professor who had been on campus that day. It started with shouting, he said. Then there were gunshots. People ran for their lives. By the time it was over, 2 young men were dead. Former Panther members described the incident as an ambush. They wanted us out of the way, one said. Karenga's people didn't want us to control the narrative. Bunchy and John were leaders. Killing them sent a message. I reached out to former U.S. members. One, a man named Gerald, insisted it wasn't planned. It was a heated argument that got out of hand, he said. But the Panthers? They were no saints. They were ready to fight. As I dug deeper, I found documents hinting at FBI involvement. COINTELPRO, the FBI's counterintelligence program, aimed to dismantle black revolutionary groups. They had infiltrated both the Panthers and Karenga's organization, stoking tensions between them. One Panther, now living in Oakland, told me, the FBI played us. They made sure we saw Karenga as the enemy. And maybe he was. But looking back, I wonder how much of it was them pulling strings. Former U.S. members described Karenga as increasingly paranoid after the shootout. He thought everyone was out to get him, one said. The Panthers, the FBI, even his own people. He started purging the organization. The deaths of Huggins and Carter fractured the movement. The Panthers accused Karenga of betrayal, and Karenga's organization faced growing mistrust. The unity they once preached was gone. 3 U.S. members were charged with the murders, but the trial left more questions than answers. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts, and some evidence mysteriously disappeared. I visited John Huggins' sister. Her home was filled with photos of her brother. They stole him from us, she said, her voice trembling. He believed in something bigger than himself, and they killed him for it. I interviewed elders who lived in LA during that time. It was like watching a family tear itself apart, one woman said. We needed them to work together, but instead, they turned on each other. I reached out to Karenga for comment. He declined. His silence felt telling, though I couldn't decide if it was guilt or frustration with being scapegoated. Declassified FBI documents revealed a sinister plan: sow distrust between black revolutionary groups. Agents spread rumors, forged letters, and planted informants. Divide and conquer, one document read. I tracked down a retired FBI agent who admitted, off the record, that they had infiltrated both groups. Our goal was to neutralize them, he said. We didn't care how it happened. The shootout wasn't just a tragedy, it was a symbol of the growing divide in the black liberation movement. Different ideologies, egos, and external manipulation had turned allies into enemies. I reviewed old news clippings. The mainstream media painted both groups as violent radicals, ignoring their community work and focusing on the bloodshed. They wanted us to look like criminals, Diane, the former Panther, told me. Many of the people I spoke to expressed regret. We should have seen it coming, one said. The system wanted us to destroy each other, and we let it happen. Bunchy was more than a Panther. He was a poet, a leader, a man who believed in his people's potential. I visited a community center named after him, where his vision for empowerment lived on. Despite his controversial past, Karenga found a new legacy in Kwanzaa, A celebration of African heritage and unity. Some saw it as atonement, others called it a distraction. One former Panther broke down as he spoke. "We fought the wrong battles," he said. "We should have been fighting the system, not each other." The women in both groups often get overlooked. They were the ones holding families together, running community programs, and advocating for peace. "We tried to stop the violence," Diane said. But no one listened. Despite their differences, both the Panthers and Karenga's U.S. organization wanted the same thing: freedom for black people. It's tragic how that shared goal became obscured by violence and betrayal. As I pieced together the story, one thing became clear: division is the most powerful weapon against any movement. The shootout was more than a clash of egos, it was a carefully orchestrated tragedy. I filed my story with a heavy heart. The deaths of John Huggins and Bunchy Carter weren't just losses for their families, they were losses for an entire movement. The Panthers and Karenga's U.S. organization were victims, not just of their own choices, but of a system determined to keep them apart. If we don't learn from their story, we risk repeating it.